Well, hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Dave McCormick here from Alpha Software, and we're going to be doing a demo and Q&A today. Today we'll be covering the second part of a three-part series on the control bar builder. I'm pleased to be joined here today by Dion McCormick, who's actually in our Boston headquarters today. Usually he broadcasts remotely from Texas, so it's fun to have him here. So a couple things before we get started. First of all, this is a question-driven webinar, so please start typing your questions into the GoToWebinar control panel, right into the questions box. And the second thing I'd like you to know is that copies of this and other recordings of our webinars will be available at videos.alphasoftware.com. In fact, we're right in the middle of cleaning up that page, so while you can find them there today, just to let you know, by next week they should be really easy to find for people who've been asking for them. So let's go ahead and get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, sir. How are you doing today?
Are you on mute? I don't hear you.
I'm on. It says I'm on there.
We're all set, man. You know what it was? It was pilot error on my part. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. Well, consider you're next door. I do. Okay, so good. Hey.
I'll go ahead and make you the presenter.
Thank you.
And,
there we go. So if there's any network difficulties, it's the office here. But yeah, enjoying the nice, crisp, cool weather. Austin was like 75 2 days ago. It was crazy. So enjoying that there. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. As always, we really enjoy having you on our weekly webinar. We'd love to see what you're interested in. So please take the time to go to the questions area and put in your questions, and Dave will be monitoring those, and we'll try to get through as many as possible. Also, just a reminder that you can always email questions to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at Alpha Software. Actually, we got 2 of them in this week. We were able to help people out very quickly, kind of point them in the right direction. So obviously, if you don't have to wait until this time to go ahead and send those in. And if we can't answer them immediately, we may put them on the webinar or try to solve you or point you in the right direction. So get those questions in. My name's Dion McCormick here in fabulous Boston, actually north of Boston there. And what we're going to do today is twofold. One is we're going to continue our discussion on the control bar. We did really an introduction to it last week, just to talk a little bit more about that. And this week we're going to dive into that at a lower detail and kind of show you some examples and start pointing to you to how you can use it for some common use cases within the system. We're also, after that, going to open it up for questions, so that's why we're asking for questions. And also, just to let you know, we had a great meeting yesterday. One of the key things we're doing this week is sitting down and looking at next year's calendar. And we're laying out the different webinars we're going to do. We're actually going to, we've had a number of people requesting what we would be called deep dives, where we spend a little bit more time than we do on the weekly webinar on a specific subject. And we're getting those lined up, and we'll be having those available in the very near future. And then along with that, we're also planning for the Fabulous training at the Fabulous DevCon towards the end of last week, or end of next year, excuse me. Next week would be a little too early. And you can find out more information about that now. Actually, let me go ahead and open up my browser here. If you just go to alphasoftware.com, and it is DevCon 2017, and we'll be posting, we're locking down the training requirements and training that we're going to be doing, so we'll be updating this page very soon after it's all been approved by everybody. But it has all the information about the location, the dates, etc. So block out those dates, October 23 to 27, and we'll be having great training. We're actually going to break it up a little differently this year for, you know, some intro for people who are new to Alpha, but also some advanced classes. So a lot of really good information is coming down the road there. So with that said, I want to go ahead and dive into the control bar part 2. The idea behind the control bar is that that space at the bottom, at the top of your mobile device and the bottom are extremely valuable pieces of real estate. And what we like to do is make sure that it's easy for you to get the most benefit out of the control bar, out of that area. And the control bar goes a long ways towards that. It makes your app simpler to maintain, simpler to build, and much more dynamic and reaches. And so today I'm going to focus on 2 areas. Areas number one is called layouts, the idea that a single control bar could have multiple layouts. And that's very powerful because you may have a situation when your app where you want to be able to change the layout of the toolbar to allow you to see something different, to have a different interface on it. Secondly, we're also going to talk about the data components. The idea is that in your toolbar here, you may have information. Like if you'll notice right here, it says 277 results. Well, that's not a fixed piece of text. That's what we call a data component. And therefore, what's nice is you can actually interact with that and update that as you go through so that your control bar becomes more intelligent and can give the person more information about what's going on, and you can use that information here. I'm going to go ahead and dive in. We're going to start by talking
Dion, we seem to be having a problem with your audio.
layouts. So with that in mind, I just do want to do a quick process.
Yeah, we seem to have a little bit of a dropout with the audio.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I had a little note that said the audio was not. I'm going to unplug and replug real quick. So
yeah, that would make sense. Thank you. Maybe that, or it may be bandwidth, in which case we'll have them reconnect, but either way we should get it resolved shortly.
I'm back in. Okay, I'm back on. My audio has green.
Okay.
Does that sound a little better now?
It sounds good. Yeah, it may have been a network issue.
Well, let me know if there's if it stops being good quality. So, and again, I'm going to blame the network here at the office versus anything else. So that's that. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the alpha development environment. For people who are new, this is the alpha development environment. In this case, what I've done is I've gone ahead and already created a new UX component called Control Bar UX. And just to show you how I got to this point where I have my control bar there, if you click New, Web Component, UX, and there's a great one in here called Mobile App Framework _ Panel Navigator with tab buttons using control bars. And that already has some pre-made toolbars or control bars that are built into it. So I just went through there, created that, and now I have my environment. So you'll notice that I've got my standard panel navigator with a set of panel cards. And then in here I have a panel header with a control bar and a panel footer with a control bar. Today I'm going to mainly focus on this control bar header. So let's go ahead and take a look at this and see what's going on from there. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and you'll notice that I have running it here. I've got my panel header up top with a menu. And then down below I have my tab buttons. And if I tab and go between pages, you'll notice that when I go to a page, it actually adjusts what's content in from there. But the control bars at top and bottom say static. So you'll notice in here I've got this static text right here. As I go between panels, you'll notice the text up here does not change. And so what I want to do is just for my first demonstration, what I'd like to do is show you how I can change this control bar when I go from page to page kind of scenario. So let's go ahead and go into design. Let's go ahead and open up the control bar. So you'll notice in the control bar, we have, and I walked through this last week, you have items. Items are the different elements, subcomponents that go into a control bar. So we have a piece of HTML, which has that static text, and then we have a menu that actually then holds other items, which are the menu items. So that's the items there. Now on here also we have control bar, layout. And so you'll notice in this, we have two existing layouts. One is for the menu and the other is the layout. Now this is kind of a special type of layout because it just shows that pop out kind of piece there. But I'm going to focus mainly on layout. So you'll notice our first layout here, we have our menu item and my app right there. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and add, I'm going to do first, one thing I'm going to do is go over here. I'm going to add a new control bar item on here. So I'm going to go ahead and click there. I have the different types of items, but in this case I'm going to click HTML. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And what HTML is can be dynamic, but will display text or HTML in wherever you place it. So I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to go say hello team. Okay. So I now have this new HTML2. So now I'm going to go into my control bar layout. So you'll notice that I have my layout here, and let's go ahead and look at how this layout is constructed. So in this layout here, you'll notice that up here we have an area where we edit. So this is my preview and this is my edit area up here. So I'm going to go ahead and you'll notice that I have a single line already in here. So I'm going to edit that line. And I'm going to move this up here a little bit here. So you'll notice that a control bar has 3 areas that can be set up. You have before, which is items here, middle, and then after. So if you'll notice at this time, I have the menu item. And remember, this refers to items here on the left in the before area. We have in the middle this HTML. So let's go ahead and in the after area, I'm going to click add. When I click add, it brings up a list of all of my different items. So this, I'm going to go ahead and select HTML2. That's my new one I just created. And I click OK. And now I'm going to show that HTML2 there. And you'll notice, boom, now I'm showing that HTML that I had before in the items area. So I created an item, went to the control bar layout, edited the layout, and updated it so it says hello team there. So I'm going to go ahead and change that real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this back out, and you'll notice I'm back to just my regular there. So the methodology is you create layouts, and then on layouts you put items. And what's kind of cool is I can actually have more than one line. I can create a second line here, and I'm going to add my HTML2. And now you'll notice I have actually 2 lines in my control bar. And there's some more advanced techniques where you can have these 2 lines, you can show and hide them as needed there. But I'm going to go ahead and delete that line since that doesn't make sense for here. So to make a good example is that I want to have the following is when I first launch in, I'm going to have my default control bar called Layout 1. But then when I go to panel card number 2, what I would like to do is show a different layout. So this is my default layout, but when I go to panel card number 2, I want to have a different layout. Now, in the olden days, i.e. a few months ago, I would have to go ahead and create a panel header for panel card number 2, and I'd have to go ahead and go in there and add a whole bunch of controls and stuff. Very inefficient, very kind of pain in the tail, and not very
Okay, so where we're at is that I created a second layout, and you'll notice when I did that it's currently giving me an error saying, hey, you don't have any layouts in here. So in layout 1, we have a line. In layout 2, we don't. So we're going to create a line here. So I'm going to click Add Line. And this one, I'm going to make it simple. What I'm going to do is in the middle area, I'm just going to add HTML2 and add it there. So now you'll notice that I have in here my HTML2 there. So now I have layout 1 and layout 2. And that's how it works from there. So now I have my 2 layouts, and the default layout is going to be layout number 1. So that's going to be the first layout that's going to be shown. And now I have a second layout, so when I want to, I can display that on command. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out now. And so if I go into working preview and I go here, you'll see at this point in time, I've got my original layout 1 showing. And if I go to panel card number 2, I see the same layout is available there. So let's go ahead and do something very simple. I'm going to go ahead and go to panel card number 1, and I'm going to go ahead and add a button here. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to call it panel card 2. So that button, when I click on it, what I want it to do is go to panel card number 2. Now I'm going to actually have it do 2 things. First, it's going to go to panel card number 2. But I also, when it goes to panel card number 2, what I want to tell it to do is show layout 2. So I can control both the panel card I'm on and also the information I have there. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go into text mode. You can use, actually, do we have panel card ones in yet? Control bar. Action. Okay, there we go. This is how we're going to do it. So I've gone ahead and double-clicked on panel card number 2, and I'm going to go ahead and add a new action. So I'm going to do my first action I'm going to do, which is I wanted to change the control bar's active layout. So I start typing in here control bar, oops, one-handed, and you'll notice that we have control bar actions, and I'm going to go ahead and select that. Now what I want to do is I want to select what action. So as you can see, I have a lot of really neat ones. I can refresh the control bar. I can set the active control bar layout, which is what we will use. I can show it and hide. I can play an action and display messages. So a lot of really nice features are built into it. So the one I would like to do is set the active control bar layout. And so the next thing it's going to ask me is which control bar, because I could have multiple in my situation. And now it's going to ask me, well, which layout? And it inspects it and shows me my layout 1 and layout 2. And in this case, obviously, I want it to be layout 2. And I want to go ahead and do animated. You can do it either way. Usually you don't do animation because you want that control bar to be really solid. So I'm going to leave it as it is there. Now that will then change the layout, but what I also want to do is I want to navigate to panel card number 2. So I'm going to use another action JavaScript here, and it's a panel action. Panel actions, multiple choices. Click OK. And I'm going to set the active panel to be panel card number 2. So now what's going to happen is when I click on that button, it should trigger 2 events. One is update my control bar. The other is there. I'm going to go click Save. I'm going to go ahead and go into my working preview. And so now I'm on panel card number 1. I'm going to click panel card number 2. And you'll notice that I'm on panel card number 2, and the header has changed now. So that now is powerful because when I'm on this particular page, I can now have a different header that adds buttons and other pieces like that. So maybe maybe this is a list here, and I want to add in the ability to have like an add button up there or a synchronize button or something along those lines. Now, one thing I do want to let you know is that you're kind of responsible for managing this. So now if I click to go back to panel card number 1, you'll notice that the layout is still set to layout number 2. So the idea is when you set the layout, it doesn't automatically go back. You have to kind of manage that. So to do that, what I can do is just go to panel card number 2. I'm going to add a button. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Make life simple. I'm going to grab this just for demo, copy that to the clipboard, go to panel card number 2, paste that. So I'm duplicating that button there, and I'm going to go ahead and say panel card 1, and I want to go ahead and I'm going to go double click in here. You'll notice I have my same action. Since I copied and pasted the panel card or that button, it kept both of them. So let's go ahead and edit these. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change the layout back to layout number 1. And then secondly, what I want to do is I want to navigate back to panel card number 1. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at this real quick. I'll go into working preview, and then we can sit there and say, okay, panel card number 2, I'm going to click there. You'll notice that we're on panel card number 2, and this has changed. When I click panel card number 1, you'll notice that it changed back to my original layout and took me to panel card number 1. Now, obviously, I want to make that a little cleaner. When I'm on panel card number 2, I don't want to have a button. Wouldn't it be nice to have a little back like arrow saying go to the previous? So let's go ahead and do the same thing, but let's use actually a control in the header instead of doing it inside here. And so I'm going to go ahead and go back into my design environment, and I'm going to go back into control bar. Oops, not 2. I don't want 2. I want to go back into control bar number 1 here. And what I want to do is on layout 2, I want to add a little button here, and that button should have a left arrow. And when I click on that button, it should take me back to the previous page or panel card number 1 and also change the layout. So let's go ahead and first thing I need to do is I need to add that little element here. Well, I can't just add it here. I actually have to go back into my items and create a new item that will be that button. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add Control Bar Item. Let's click Button here, and let's call that Nav Panel Card 1. And we'll make a dedicated one that does that. And notice there's some predefined actions that are built in here, by the way. submit, reset, list, detail, view. And this was a really powerful one because, for instance, you could have like sync and other things here. So you don't have to create them from scratch. We all have a bunch of them. Like, for instance, I have a set active panel, and I could just say panel card number 1. Let's go ahead and do that. And you'll notice now that on the click, it will actually, it actually did 2 things for me. But I want to do it manually, and then we'll come back and look at that in a minute. So let's go ahead and add a control bar item. We'll go nav panel card 1. It's of type button. So now I have this button on here, and you'll notice at this point it just has like some text. And what I'd like to be able to do is, instead of showing text, I want that to be a nice little icon. So I'm going to go down here to my new button that I've created. I'm going to go to button layout, text only, and I'm going to go down and select image only. So this is very similar to other buttons on the UX where you can have text, you can have images, you could have a combination of that, but I just want an image here. And now I can go into my icons here, which has just showed up, click there, and I'm going to go to SVG icon because that's now the standard, and I can click select. And you'll notice then I have all these nice looking icons that are available to me. And I can either, kind of look visually through it, or I can kind of type what I think would be the name, and here you go. I'm going to go ahead and click the alpha icon chevron left and click OK. So now instead of text, this item, this button will show this icon. So now that I have that button, let's go to our control bar layout, and you'll notice I'm still on layout number 2. We can now edit this and add that button in there. So I'm going to edit this line. In my left area over here, I'm going to click add and go to our new button here, click OK and OK, and now you notice we have a nice little button that has a nice hover over effect and all that pieces there. So I click OK, click save. I'll go into working preview. I'll go ahead and click panel card number 2. You'll notice now that I'm showing the new layout. But you'll notice if I click on this, nothing happens. So I have basically a button, but it's an empty button with no actions that are available. So let's go ahead and go back to design, go back into control bar. And so we have our layout with our item, and we have our item here, but you'll notice under the item X, when I want to hit the click event, there's nothing there. That's why there's no behavior when I click on it from there. So what I'd like to do is this, is I'm going to go ahead and click the ellipsis button right here, and this is going to show me the existing actions. And actually that one I created a little earlier is sitting in there. But you'll notice I have my existing actions. But since I haven't really created my action yet, I want to go in here and I want to say, okay, if I click on it, there's no action there. So the idea is, and we talked about this last week, is that you have items and they're kind of placeholders. They're either images or buttons or things like that. The behaviors are done in the action areas, and then you relate the actions to the items in the click event or pieces there. And the benefit of that is you can create one action that can be used by multiple items in your application. So let's go ahead and let's go into actions, and what we need to do is recreate essentially what we did here, which was when we clicked on this button, it went to the back to the panel card number 1 and set the layout there. Now, there are 2 ways to do it. I'm going to show you the action JavaScript method, and then I'm going to come back and show you how you can just do it with JavaScript. And once you kind of get used to JavaScript, it's actually a little faster, but I'm going to show you how to do this from there. So, because I want to make it so that you can always do these things with as little coding as possible. So I'm going to add a new action, and I'm going to call that action nav panel card 1. So now I have a new action here. And I could go ahead and start typing in JavaScript right here, like I could put alert or whatever it happens to be. And all it's going to do is when this action is triggered, it's going to call that JavaScript. In fact, let me show you that. Let's say I just want to do an alert. So when someone clicks on that, it does an alert. So now I can go back to my items, select panel card number 1, click here, it'll show me all my actions, including my new one, click OK, and now what I've done is I've associated my new action, which is just a set of JavaScript, with this button. So when I click on this button, it's going to trigger that event or that action. So now when I go in here, and run this, it's not going to do what we want to do yet, but I'll go to panel card number 2, and then I can click here. You'll notice that it ran that little alert JavaScript and showed it here. And so not exactly what I want. So let's go back into the control bar. So now I've got my layout ready. All I have to do is really focus on this action to get it to do what I want it to do. So I'm going to use the no-code approach. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Action Nav panel card. I'm going to click up here, Action JavaScript, and I'm going to create Action JavaScript. And it's going to be called Nav. It seems a little panel card 1. Okay. And now I'm going to edit this Action JavaScript, and you're going to see this is very similar to what I did before. The first thing I want to do is I want to do a control bar action. And that action is set the active layout to be on control bar number 1 to be layout number 1, because we're going back there. So again, what I want to do is I want to change the layout from layout 2, which is where, to number 1. And now what I want to do is I want to add another action, which is my panel card action, set the active panel to be panel card number 1. So this is identical to what I did with the button on the user interface. And now that I have my Action JavaScript, I can, this is what the little JavaScript I need to put in to run it. So now I just paste that right here and off to the races. Now before I run this, I want to go back through that real quick just because I kind of went through it fairly quickly. So when this action is triggered, it's just going to run whatever JavaScript in here. And I could go ahead and add that JavaScript. But another method is I can use our Action JavaScript builder where I can create an action. That action consists of these, including things like sending emails, doing mapping. I mean, it's all across the board you can do. And then once I have that, there is, if you see down here, I've created this sort of series of events that's going to occur. If you click here to see the JavaScript code, this is the little piece of JavaScript you need to run that action. And the cool thing is, again, you could have as many of these actions behind you, and all you have to do is run this little piece of code here. So I'm copying that to the clipboard, and I'm pasting it right there. So now when a person clicks on this, it's going to essentially run my Action JavaScript I've just created. So let's give it a try, make sure it works. Go in here, and in the moment, once it's updated it there, I'll go to panel card number 2. Now when I select here, I should see this header change, the control bar layout change, and I should navigate. And sure enough, it worked. And again, all I'm doing is I took essentially the same Action JavaScript and associated with this little left arrow there. Now I'd like to do one more thing. I actually won't be able to get to data today because this took a little longer than I anticipated. We're going to do data next week, and it's really fun and very cool, and you're going to love it. But I want to touch on one thing, as I said before. I'm going to go back into my control bar number 1. And for newbies and people, you know, this Action JavaScript works great. It's easy to use in those pieces there. But people who are a little bit more experienced, you may be able to just, a lot of the common things like setting the current panel, setting data, you'll see is kind of the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I've already created something similar to this. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Okay, I'm going to go back in here. And I'm going to go ahead and, by the way, commenting in JavaScript is 2 forward slashes. I'm going to paste in this little piece of JavaScript right here. And I'm going to do that here. And I'm going to walk you through what this is. So this will do essentially the same thing as my Action JavaScript. And in fact, just to let you know, I kind of cheated. What I did is after I created my Action JavaScript, I actually viewed the JavaScript, and this shows you exactly how it should work. So you can actually, you don't even need to kind of do any research. You can create these Action JavaScripts, click on them, click View JavaScript, and copy this out here. So what's going on is this, and let me walk you through the code and we'll finish this up and go there, is the first thing it's going to do is it's getting a pointer to a control. It's called the control. So what it needs to do is first we need to know, hey, we're going to be changing the layout on that control bar. So JavaScript kind of needs to know the handle to get to that. And so that's the first thing I'm doing is getting the control bar 1 and putting it there. Then the next thing I'm going to do is call a JavaScript command on that called set layout And in here, this is going to be called layout 1. It's the name of that layout there. And again, if I go ahead and go into my Action JavaScript real quick, let's go ahead and look at that and open that and view the JavaScript. You'll see it's getting a pointer to control bar number 1, and then we're setting this to be layout number 1. And so I'll go ahead and cancel out of that. So now there. Now the next thing I want to do is after I set the layout to the proper layout, and my layouts, I think they're case sensitive, so I got to be careful. Yeah, very important is whenever you're doing anything with JavaScript, it's case sensitive. So it's layout 1, and let me double check that real quick. Yeah, capital L-A-O, so there. So it's case sensitive. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the panel be active, and in this case, that's called panel card on here, panel card _1. There we go. So you can do it either way, and so let's go ahead and test this to make sure it's worked correctly. There we go. Go to my panel card number 2, and good, voila, does work there. Now, the reason I went through that is the following, is that obviously we want to encourage you to use Action JavaScript as much as possible. It creates the proper code, it makes sure there's no little errors or anything like that, works great. The downside is that, you know, in order for me to create these 3 lines of code, I have to go in here, create it, set it, this. Once you kind of get used to the control bar, you can take this, copy it, put it on the clipboard or on, you know, a little, wherever you want to save it, and the next time you need to do this kind of behavior, you can paste it here and edit it. So you'll find as you work with the control bar, usually you're doing a few different things. You're setting what active layout it is. You're navigating to a panel card. You're setting a data element kind of scenario. So what I feel you'll find out is that as you get comfortable with it, you'll be just copying and pasting this from one control to the other and editing it because it's really fast and simple. But do not, you can always use Action JavaScript, and you can even use Action JavaScript as kind of your way to understand, well, let's say I wanted to do a map thing. I could actually go in here and use the map method and then grab that JavaScript out of it and edit it and put it in my system from there. So to wrap it up here, I want to go ahead and we'll cut it off here. We'll go into data next week. First and foremost is that we have these new concepts called control bars. You'll notice one in the header and the footer. In a control bar, you have things called items. So in this case, I had like my little piece of static text, or I had my button here. We have actions, which are behaviors, and actions are associated to items in the situation. So I can have like nav panel card 1. When I click on that, it's going to run one of my actions I created. And that's one of the key things is remember, you're going to have items are separate from actions. In other things, you would just go ahead and put the JavaScript here, but it's a little bit more that way. And then last but not least, we have the layout area where we take our items and put them onto layouts. And you can have one or many layouts. So for instance, we have our layout 1 is on the first one here, and then I have layout 2. And the way you edit that is you have basically for each layout, you have a before, a middle, and after. The before area is here on the left side, the middle is in here, and the after is on the right-hand side. And by the way, the reason we call it before, middle, after is that there's nothing that says this has to be horizontal. It could be vertical. That's why we don't say left, middle, and right, because it could be top, middle, and bottom. So therefore, realize, you know, if I go back to my menu layout for here, you know, it's got my befores for my menu because they're vertical orientation. So I have my layouts that are available, and I can swap them dynamically. So if I'm on like a list, I can put the name of the list at the top and maybe a plus button up there. And then when I go into the details, I want to be able to show editing functions when I'm on the details. And the way we accomplish that is through either using Action JavaScript or JavaScript on this action that says, get the control bar, set the active layout, whatever it happens to be, and then there. And the important thing I think you really need to take away on this is that it's all broken into small pieces. You can use the built-in tools there. The only other thing is realize that you're kind of on the hook to manage the state of that layout. As we showed earlier on, when I first set it up where I had my button on the first page and I clicked panel card number 2, and then I went back. You'll notice when I went back the first time through, it didn't change the panel bar, control bar layout. So you're going to have to do a little management there. But once it's very small, that these actions are almost identical. And what's great is then you can have basically this customized header and footer for every sort of situation the user is in that makes it easy for them to activate and do things on the screen. And once you get kind of comfortable with that, you're going to be just fantastic. You'll have so much fun. It's really, I got to tell you, it's one of the funnest controls I've used in a long time because there's sort of a sense of instant gratification. It's easy to tweak it, change it, view it, do all that, and make it look really, really sharp. Next week, I'm going to do two things. One is I want to show how, you'll notice this control bar right now we're using our alpha style, but I want to show you how you can quickly change the colors here without having to spend much time. And then secondly, I'm going to go into the idea of data. And what the data concept is that if you'll notice, we have these items called HTML1, HTML2, and when I did my layout, I put those on my layout. Well, what if I want to change this hello team on the fly to say something differently? Well, that's where we're going to use data elements and a little bit more JavaScript to change the data element, and you're going to love it. It will kind of tie it all together, and then after that, we'll dive into disclosures, which is another powerful feature, and that should give you a good footprint on using this tool there. But I'm going to go ahead and stop at this point here, click OK, save that. I'm going to hand it back to Dave for any kind of questions there. That way we have plenty of time for any questions about this, plus any other burning questions.
Great, thank you very much, Dion. So we do have a bunch of questions and quite a few on the control panel. on the control bar, and one of which is probably something you're going to cover next week. But I'll read the question to you anyway. And it is there a way to move one or more data fields into the control bar?
Ah, gotcha. So fields that would normally be in the panel card onto the control bar?
I suspect yes. Yep.
Yes, and the answer is yes. Basically, when we talk about data next week, think of let me open that up. You'll have these data elements, and these data elements, basically can hold data, and that data can be information from a list control, could be information on a detail view, could be stuff that you define from a web service. It's up to you completely. And so you can populate those data elements and then display those data elements on the user interface. And I'll go through some simple examples of how to do that. Plus, I'll also show you how if you have a list control and you go from the list to the detail view, during that process, I can set the data up top so that it shows like what item was selected from the list, which is a very common design pattern. I want to know, well, what item am I editing on my list? So I'll go through that next week. But the answer is yes, you absolutely can do that.
Excellent. And somewhat related, someone asked if it's possible to put a short text component onto the control bar. So that
good point. Essentially the data is a text, but we also have another type of item here called a edit. So that would be a text box. And the benefit of that is that you could put in a control bar the filter function, like you could have where the person types in and then a button saying filter to filter, say, a list. So we do have, this is kind of static text, the HTML, and we use static text along with data. But then the edit is a text box control that allows you to put actually data entry elements on the control bar. And I'll try and touch on that too, because I think that's probably another common use case. I thought this was going to be a 2-weeker, but it's turned out to be a little bit more, which is fine.
Yep, a lot of features in this one.
There's so much in this. Yep.
Another question is there a way to add bubble help when using a button on the control bar like you can with a normal button?
The answer is not really. The reason why is this is mobile-oriented, and bubble really kind of only works in the mouse world where you're hovering over something. In the mobile world, you're either touching it or not touching it. So I don't really think there's a way in terms of this button. Well, let's look at it. Maybe I could be wrong. You can adjust the icons there, and you can adjust the different behavior on that there, but I really don't see anywhere.
There is a hover icon, but that's just for the...
It's a hover class name, but I think that will only be triggered if it's running within a web browser with like a mouse of it.
Right.
Because this is meant for both mobile and not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we're going to show an example of using this in desktop web also. So the answer would be yes, but it really is not going to behave that way. Well, I guess not. I really don't see any there. Now, the tricky thing is you could actually use a class that could, a CSS class that when someone hovers over this button, you could actually create a class that maybe changes the name of the button or, you know, puts a little text next to it. I mean, there's pretty crazy things you can do with CSS, but I don't really see the traditional bubble help in this technology because it's really primarily targeted for phones and tablets that don't use a hover concept.
Great. Someone else asks, if you wanted to get more text HTML onto a control bar, could you make the text smaller or get it to wrap around or something like that?
Yes. Basically, this is just, you can apply, so let me go to a text item, this HTML2. This is full HTML. So I could actually go in here and put in, like, I want to make it bold. You know, so that would make it bold when it's showing on there. In fact, you can open the HTML and do that from that standpoint there. An alternative to that, which I highly recommend is kind of the way we do it now, is that instead of actually putting commands in here, what you can do is apply CSS to this text. So you can have CSS and then in here tell it what kind of CSS it should be used. That way you kind of separate the visual commands out to a separate file that you can handle it there. But this is straight HTML, so you have complete freedom to lay it out, use the HTML editor. I can go in here and I can highlight this and just say, you know, I want to create a link or whatever. It's just going to accept whatever it happens to be. Like I want it to be bold, so, oh, it's strong, not there. Maybe I also want to do this underlined, you know. So now this would show up as bold and underlined. And it's just going to interpret these HTML commands. And some of those HTML commands could be font size, could be font style, etc., and also CSS commands to get it laid out the way you want it to be laid out.
Here's actually a great question is, do your two control bars, your control bar 1 and 2, although it looks like I think what they mean are different control bar layouts, do they share actions such as and UX resources such as the actions and the items and things like that?
The answer is no. The actions are self-contained within that control bar. So I can't, if you notice I'm in control bar number 2 and I have an action that's built into there. This is just the action to navigate the different pages. I'm not seeing those actions I've created in control bar number 1. So yeah, they don't share between the control bar. They're sort of these self-contained entities. And you know, one of the things that's nice about that is I could take this control bar, if I really like it, I can sit there and say, copy that to the clipboard, create a whole new a whole new UX, paste it in there, and then it will have a lot of the behaviors and everything ready to go. And so I just need to tune it up for that particular. So you'll see the control bar will promote sort of templating / reuse as you start to use it some more. But that's a great question, and the answer, I'm sorry, is a big no.
Okay.
My name is?
No. Mud. Let's see what I've got here. Is there a way to have a data-bound image in a control bar, like the user image, for example?
That is a very good question. Well, HTML itself, you know, you can put in image references within the HTML itself. So yeah. This is just these items right here. This HTML is straight HTML. So you can, instead of putting in HTML text, you can insert an image here. Let's go ahead and try that. Let's break this bad boy. Let's go ahead and go in here and let's insert an image. I'm just going to put in an SVG icon because it's small. And then OK. And so now, if I do a working preview, you'll see that I've got my little image right there. It's kind of dimmed out right now, but it's right there. It's kind of a plus with there. But that doesn't mean I'm limited to SVG icons. I can go back in here. I can edit this. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that image there. And I can click Insert Image, and I can use a built-in image. I can use a URL from an external or something that's in my a current image that's sitting in my project right now, like this control panel, although that would be very large. But maybe a wait GIF. Let's put that in there. Let's see what happens there. So notice it's just inserting that HTML command there. And a couple things we'll talk a little bit more is that, again, you could create multiple of these and then dynamically show that, that image. You could create that image as a data element, so we'll play with that. But you also have things called show expression where you can put in here, JavaScript expressions to say whether to show or hide that. So a lot of flexibility. It's kind of different ways to skin the cat. But let's go ahead and see if this worked. And we should see a little waiting. Maybe I have to go to, I think I have to be in live preview. So let's see if we go in there and do that. Some things just don't like to do things in working preview. Dun, 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 dun. Bear with me. There we go. Pretty cool, huh?
There you go.
So the neat thing about that is that you could use that, and there's actually wait images, and we'll show that pop up and kind of obscure the screen. That's more normal. But if you had like some background process going, you could actually show and hide this image with JavaScript on the fly to say, hey, something's going on, like it's communicating during synchronization, or it's trying to reach the server. Who knows? Whatever. There's a lot of flexibility. But this is just a little piece of HTML that I associated with my header, and it will show there. So if I go back, show it, just shows it there. Good question.
Cool. Another question is, could you have your login and logout buttons on your control bar?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And in fact, that's a regular kind of scenario, is that usually on your first, like this is a little deceptive. If you notice that when we go to here, this would normally be a login page, my first like a splash page. So you probably wouldn't have much of a control bar or menu kind of structure from there. But once you're in, so you'd probably have either no control bar on the first page or that. But then with your menu, let's go ahead and create a new menu item and call it log out. So what I'm doing is, first thing I'm doing is creating my item. And that item is going to be a button. So I'm going to click OK. And then what I want to be able to do is that I'm going to change the style of that button to be a image only. I'll go into my icon. I'll go to SVG icon. And I'll go to filter it. And they have a nice, there's a logout. Where is that? Exit. There it is. Kind of a universal, like I'm getting out of here kind of thing. They also have the opposite of that, an entry one too. So now I've got my logout there. So I'm going to go to my control bar layout. I'm going to go to my menu here. And remember, this is kind of interesting. I appreciate the person bringing this up, is that I'm going to go ahead and into this menu. You'll notice I have my menu items here. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this line. I'm going to go ahead and look and add my new logout to the menu there. Now you'll notice it's at the top. I don't want it to be at the top. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on it and use my up downs to move it down to the bottom. So now you'll see I've got a nice little logout icon on my menu. Now, what's very interesting is that this menu layout is kind of a special thing. Think of it as a sub layout. So if I go to layout 1, you'll notice that I have this layout here called menu, which points to my menu layout. And that's how that works from there. So now when I go in my app, I have my logout button right here. And I might want to do that actually as a icon and text. It's up to you on how you want to do it. So let's go ahead and clean that up a little bit real quick. Go back into my control bar. Go to my, now the cool thing is once I've set up my layout, I don't have to touch my layout anymore. I can just tweak it right here. And so on my logout, I want it to be a image followed by text, and the text is going to be logout. And so now if I go look at my layout and look at my menu layout, it now has, it says button. So I have to get that fixed. So where is my logout? Where's my text name? There it is. And I'm going to call that log out. Now if I go back to my control bar. So this is part of it's kind of fun. Did I not save that? I didn't. I'll go ahead and select another. There we go. Now I got my credit. Now I got logout there. Now you'll notice there's missing one other thing too. When I click on this logout button, nothing's going to happen to it. So what I need to do is, if I go back to my logout and I say, okay, I'm going to, on the click, I'm going to do something. I'm going to, I need a logout action. So I'll actually go to actions here. I will add an action here, and I'm going to call that log out. Okay. And then I can put my log out function here, which would probably be a panel card to go to the splash screen plus a log out. But I want to show you one other thing here. You'll notice down here we have a code genie. And the code genie has a whole bunch of, and these are the starting points. We have some other things that you can do. You can display a message, generate a code to show the disclosure, etc. But so I would do probably the command would be dialog. And this is where once you get to kind of know the 5 or 6 most often used items, I can just sit here and go to panel card number 1. That would be like, so this is a little piece of JavaScript that navigates me to my splash page. And then also on here, I can go A5WS. Then there's a logout function that I would put in here to say log them out so that they're logged out from the connection. Often when I go to panel card, the login piece, the only way they can get back in is if they enter in a username password and go through that process there. So very important is I've gone ahead and I created my item. I put it, in this case, I added it to my menu, which shows up in layout 1. Then I created my action, but I have to go back to my logout and actually select that to say when the person clicks on logout to run that action. So step 1, create your item. Step 2, put it on your control bar wherever you want it to be. It can be on one or many layouts. It doesn't have to be on one. And step 3, create your action with associating that to the logout or to the item itself through the click event. And then once you have that, this will just stay on the same one. So let's see. Actually, let me go here. Watch this. I'll go all the way to panel card 4, and then I'll click logout and watch what happens. I'm on panel card number 1, and off to the races from there. So.
Terrific.
Cool.
All right. So.
Yeah, great question.
In the example that you showed, you had a button on a control bar, and when you clicked on that button, it was able to bring you to a different panel card, and you were able to have a different control bar. The question they had is, can you do it the other way around? In other words, could you create a panel that, when it was navigated to, was smart enough to know which control bar it's supposed to have?
Outstanding. A very, very quick. Let's see. Yes, there is a way, because I do know panel cards. Let's see, where is it?
They have like a
maybe
display event or on something.
Yeah, but you'll notice I only see the onClick. What I've done here is I've selected panel card number 2. Mm-hmm. And see, this is when it's initially, when it's resized and when it's in the swiping. But I don't see a on show or on display. But I see what you're saying is and that's a very good point. Where I did most of my training on this, I had a recent prototype project, and you have to kind of go through, and it is. So what you would, and what the reality was I was associating a different control bar with each panel card, and therefore I kind of had to manage, if I'm on this panel card, anytime I navigate that either on a list or in a button, I have to make sure to set it properly. And I agree with you, and I'll do a little research before our meeting next week, is that wouldn't it be nice is that when the panel card got hit, now there is something this is very powerful, and I'll cover it next week. Let me go to the panel cards, and I'm going to go to layout code now. What you can do is there's 2 ways you can set it out. Is you can actually create a watch event to set the layout kind of thing. So let me explore that and come up with the best way to handle that. And see if there's a way kind of associate, because really what I ended up doing was I created a layout for each panel card, and I just want to make sure when I'm on that panel card I'm showing that. So that's a very valid, very good input. I'll do a little research and make sure I can give you some good answers next week on how would you do it. So instead of having to remember every time you go to that panel card, is there a way for the panel card itself to say, hey, guess what, I need this layout on myself, and so I'll check that out. And I just happen to be sitting by the person who created it, so I'm going to cheat and go talk to him instead of research.
That's the way to
tell
do
him.
it. Yeah.
Don't tell him. Tell him I spent an hour trying to figure that out. Couldn't do it.
So I've got a couple of sort of more advanced questions, because they have to do with using multiple layouts. One person asks, if I had a UX that was embedded in a UX, could I use the control bar to access that embedded UX?
Yes.
Okay. And the other
Yep.
one is, could I use this as a replacement for, say, the tabbed UI? So tabbed UI, for those who don't know, is one of our more
Yes.
popular components, which lets you basically put a whole bunch of web components on a single web page, and there's a menu bar that lets you open them in sequence, and then
Yes.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. The one thing you're going to find is that the control tabbed UI has some nice features. Like when you add the buttons to the left-hand side, you can set security criteria and other things like that. You lose a little bit of that in the control bar environment because it's a little different methodology. But you can create the same thing, because you think about it, you could have a horizontal control bar, which is at the top of your page, and then you could also insert a control bar in the left side of it, and you can use what's called a panel layout. Instead of a panel navigator where only one panel is shown at one time, with a panel layout you could set it up with like a top area, a left area, and then a content area. And within that you could have a control bar up top and a control bar on the left, and that control on the left could just be a menu. And that menu can be, you could then create your menu items here, and then then you would create your actions. Like for instance, action number 1 would be maybe navigate to page, you can use any action JavaScript, so you can navigate to another page or other pieces there. Now the only other thing I would caution on the tabbed UI that's really nice is that the tabbed UI has what's called they have the tabs at the top. So when you click the button, it actually opens each control report or whatever in a different tab. And so that's kind of just built into the nature of it. So again, it kind of does that for you. Nicely enough, a UX has something called a dynamic panel. So you could, and I did this, God, that was probably about 8 months ago where I went in there and did that. But you can actually kind of recreate a whole tabbed UI using a combination of control bars and what's called the dynamic panels, where you can create panels on the fly, and those panels can show up on tabs there. But we're going to be talking about, not next week, but after that, is how we could use the control bars in a desktop web interface versus a mobile, to kind of give you a feel for how you can use all the information we're going through here to do that. But absolutely, I think you'll lose a little flexibility because some of the things are kind of nicely built into alpha or into the, but you're going to have, the nice thing is you now have complete control over the look and feel of this. So you can style all your buttons nicely using CSS, and therefore you get a lot more control over the nicer, you get a more modern look and feel versus a control bar, which sometimes is a little prickly to get that. So great point, great point.
Excellent. We have about 4.5 seconds left, but I still want to get this last question. It's a good one. And how do you change between a vertical and a horizontal layout for your control bars?
Very good point. Okay, so the menu layout here is, let's go ahead and add a layout. Let's see, where is this? That's a great question. So I don't want that layout there. That's it. It has to do with when you're creating a menu. And I apologize, I just don't know that off the top of my head, so I'll have to find that out. But okay, if we go to, let's see, let me go to my items. I have this item here called a menu. And it's a type of disclosure. And a disclosure is kind of like a pop-up area here. And we'll be talking a little bit more about how that disclosure works there. But what you can do with the control bars, let's look here. You can set the width of the control bar, and therefore it only takes a certain amount of space. And then inside the control bar itself with the layout, like I did with the menu, I put them all vertically on the before side. And so they're all going to show up one on top of the other stacked. So to create kind of that left bar control, like tabbed UI, you would create a layout where everything is on the before side. And then what you would do is actually on the control bar itself, you would set the width to be a certain percentage so it doesn't take up the whole page kind of scenario. Now, what you may want to do is with a panel layout, you could have a panel layout card for your left side and say that's about 20% of the screen, and then the control bar within it would take 100% of it. So it's really dictated not by the control bar, but the panel in which it lives in. So you can kind of play with that a little bit there. So it's a combination of constraining the control bar width, and then when you create your layout, go ahead and make sure when you do your layout here, you put all of your items in, oops, let me go here, sorry. Put them all on the left side and they'll stack on top of each other. Even though this is showing kind of a horizontal, when you see it actually running, it's constrained by its width of one item wide. So therefore, each one is one on top of the other, and you could do the same thing without the slide out and just have this permanently on the left side. And let me see, do a horizontal. Now notice this. The menu, actually you would use the menu concept, because when I go to horizontal, you'll notice that, oh no, it's still working the same way. I thought it was a permanent kind of scenario. So you would use what's called the panel layout and the width factor to set up the menu there.
Great. Well, we have far too many questions, but Dion, I'm going to send you a quick report of them afterwards.
Deeper.
Yes.
I was going to show data. I was going to do all this other stuff, but yeah.
Well, that's like, okay. We have one more session for that, so we will be back next week, right? The 21st.
Yes, sir.
We're back at that week, right? Exactly. We may take the following week off. If we do, we'll let you know, and we'll prepare something special for you guys. So anyway, thank you very much, Dion, for presenting. Thank you, everyone who attended and asked questions. By all means, send additional questions over to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Thanks again. We hope to see you at a future webinar. Take care, and goodbye.